Hi, welcome to this session on PowerApps. Thank you for attending, whatever time zone you're in. My name's Alan Richards. I'm an independent IT consultant, worked in the field for about 20 years, a lot of that with SharePoint and an awful lot of that in the recent years with Office 365. I've also been an MVP for 5 years, hopefully in July it'll be 6. My contact details are here on the screen if you want to get hold of me after the session or any time basically to talk about anything that I've discussed through this PowerApps session. So the first thing is the session title is PowerApps, but what we're actually going to look at is PowerApps and Microsoft Flow. They are now two distinct products. If any of you watched the session of the future of SharePoint on May the 4th, then you'll have seen some demos and Jeff Teeper talking about PowerApps and Flow. They are both easily connected to data. They are wholly designed for people with little or no code experience. The premise being that you can create a Power App or a Flow with no coding experience whatever. A simple power user can use the technology to create extremely intelligent Power Apps and Microsoft Flows. A lot of that is basically because they are template driven. There's an awful lot of templates in there which we'll look at when we do our demos that you can use to create simple, quick Power Apps and Flows. So let's look at Power Apps first. It's integrated into Office 365. If you will notice, it's already on the app launcher as a Power Apps you can go into, and you can see there on the screen some screenshots of the web pages within Office 365. There's some templates to get you started, so there's some service desk ones, budget tracker that you can see on there, and there's a Windows Store app, which is what you will use to work on your apps, so to create them, change the design, and if you have the experience you can add a little bit of code in there as well to make them even better. There's also an iPhone and Android app, which again I'm going to show the iPhone app in the demo, that will run your Power Apps. So your users not only have the browser experience to run the apps, but they can also access them from iPhone and Android, making your apps mobile at the same time. So Microsoft Flow. It's a simple and effective flows to get notifications. So you can see from the screenshot there, if you look at some of the actual icons in there, one of them is save my email attachments to a SharePoint library. So that basically will pull out any attachments into a library. You can also get an email for notification. So if a new document is added to a document library, you can set up a flow to email people. But the one thing it does is not just work with Office 365. So there are an awful lot of connections that we will discuss in a bit, which connect to extra and non-Microsoft applications. You can also create from scratch using the Windows app, so you can create your own flows, and you can also view run instances of flows, so you can see how they're running and are there any failures, have they actually worked. So that's Microsoft Flow and Microsoft Power Apps. But how do they actually get to the data? And that's where connections come in. So the connections are a way for Flow and Power Apps to actually get to your data, to get to your Microsoft lists in SharePoint, to get to your Dropbox, to get to CRM Online, to get to MailChimp. So as you can see from the screenshots, there are an awful lot of connections already. Not all of them are Microsoft based, and that list is growing all the time. So how do you manage Power Apps? There's two URLs on the screen there for you, one for Power Apps, one for Flow, and these are used to basically be able to get to your connections, your Power Apps, your flows. And in the Flow one in particular, you can pause them, you can see the run instances as we've discussed, but as well as that you can manage all of that using the app that you can get from the Windows App Store. Again, we'll look at all of this in the demo. So let's look at demos. So what we're going to do here is actually look at Power Apps and Microsoft Flow. We're also going to look at the Power Apps Windows app for creating Power Apps and Flows, and also show you a quick demo of how PowerApps appears on an iPhone. Okay, so we've looked at PowerApps and Flow. So what we're going to do now is some demos. So what I've got here is my apps in my SharePoint tenant, and as you can see here we've got the two new applications, so PowerApps and Flow. So let's look at PowerApps first off. So this is the web front end for PowerApps. Here you can see some sample apps that Microsoft have given us. So let's have a look at the service desk one. And here we can choose to open it by phone or tablet. So let's go for tablet as it looks better on the screen. So this is the web player we were talking about, which allows you to launch your PowerApps within the browser. So if the user has access to the browser, they obviously can launch their PowerApps from this without having to use their phone or anything like that. So here we can see this service desk PowerApps, and basically it's aimed around an IT service desk. So you can see some ticket IDs here. We could click on and see a new ticket. We could tickets in progress. We can then click on that ticket to go into it, and as you can see it's a very rich environment, easily used by power users and end users, and a great way to actually interact with your end users. And obviously this is being demoed on a PC, but what we'll have a look in one of the demos in a minute is actually how you can use your iPhone to use exactly the same Power App. Let's come out of this and go back to the PowerApps homepage. Now we're back at the home page. You can see on the left hand side we've got our navigation items, so we can look into my apps. At the moment there's nothing there, and at the moment the only way you can create that is using the PowerApps Windows app. As you'll see in a moment when we go through the end of the slides, one of the features coming in the roadmap is a web-based designer for creating PowerApps. You can also see down here we've got flows. That's one flow there at the moment that I'll show you in a moment. We've also got connections. Now let's talk about connections for a bit. So connections are how PowerApps and Flow actually connects to your data, how it talks to it, how it finds that data that you want to run your Power App on, or how it looks at a document library or a list to run the flow on. So if we go to click on new connection, you can see the list of connections we can actually look at. So we've got things like Dynamic CRM, we've got Facebook in there, we've got Google Drive, we've got MailChimp. The list is quite extensive at the moment, and Microsoft are always adding to that. So what I'm going to do is just create a connection to my personal Dropbox. So we'll use this in a demo for one of the flows in a minute. So if I click on Dropbox and I go to add connection, what it's going to ask me to do basically now is actually connect to Dropbox, actually put in my user details. So what I just log in here is my username and password for my personal Dropbox and sign in. What that does now is goes and authenticates against Dropbox. We need to tell it to allow Microsoft PowerApps access into the files and folders in there. And there we have a connection that's basically for Dropbox. Now these are connections I'm going to show you how to use in a flow in a moment, but I'll explain what they actually are. So here we've got a connection to Outlook, Office 365 Outlook, which basically will look at my mailbox, so I could use that in a flow so that it looks, if a particular item comes into my Office 365 Outlook, it can strip out the attachment and put it in a SharePoint document library, or it can just basically email me or message me or text me to say this email has arrived in your inbox. This one is users, so what this one does is actually uses an account to actually log into Office 365 and actually query the users that are in your tenant. And finally this one for SharePoint Online literally is a connection to your SharePoint tenant and a particular site. So what I'll do is I'll show you how to connect this, another one, to SharePoint Online. So we go to the new connection and we scroll down and find SharePoint Online and we add the connection. Now I'm already logged in to Office 365 because I'm in PowerApps. So it's picked up my user details. I'm going to sign in with that username and password. And there we go. So we'll now show you how to do a connection to SharePoint Online. So I've got two there at the moment. So what I'm going to do is just go into it, and you can see here some of the details. The auth button at the top allows you to change the account that actually uses that connection. And for now I'm just going to delete that one because I don't actually need two connections to SharePoint Online. So there we are with connections. So let's start a new app. Now you will notice in the bottom left hand corner there is a button for new app. At the moment all that does is obviously launches a pop-up box that tells you to download the PowerApps Studio application. So we'll close that. We've got mine open here already. As you can see, I'm logged in. If I go to the open button, I can see the apps that Microsoft have created for us, those sample apps. And if I click on one of them, it will launch in the PC, in the PowerApps application. And as you can see, extremely rich, a fantastic app there that highlights some of the things you can do with Microsoft PowerApps. So we can click on any one of these, and as you can see, the center box changes to show us that detail. So if we just come out of that one, and what we're going to do now is create a new Power App. So if we click on the new button, as you can see, we've got a number of options. So we've got some apps you can create from your data, if that data is in OneDrive for Business or SharePoint Online or CRM. And down here we can create an app, basically a blank one, or we can create one using a template. So let's start with a template. We're going to use a phone layout because we're going to use an iPhone demo in a bit, and we want it to fit on that nicely. So we're going to go for a budget tracker, and down here you'll see that I've got a connection already made to OneDrive for Business, and that's where this template is going to store its data. So all of the sample data, which will be in an Excel file, will be stored in that OneDrive for Business. So if I click on Use, and then what happens is that the PowerApps application will go ahead, upload the sample data to my OneDrive for Business, and then create the layouts and the pages for that sample app. So now our app's created. What we've got now is it's opened the SharePoint it's not open the SharePoint at all. So our Power App is now created, and what it's opened here is the PowerApps Designer application. So you can see down the left hand side are all the different pages to the app, and then across here a fairly standard office type ribbon where we can start to insert different types of things, so buttons, images, text. We can change the design, so we could change the theme, for instance. So we could go for a red theme or a blue one, or we could go for brown, which is not very nice. So we could stick to the light theme there. And up on the top right hand corner we've got a play button. So if we click on the first page and we just click play, what it'll do is load up that application, and we can see here all the details in a rather expanded view that will appear on an iPhone. So we can click into them. We can add an expense. So here we are in this team event, we've budgeted this amount of money, we've spent this, so we've got quite a bit remaining, so let's add an expense in there. So the expense is travelling, and the amount is 200, and we've got a drop down box here, and we put transport, and we can add a receipt in there. So if we go to add the receipt, then basically what it will do is use the camera. Now at the moment my web camera is obviously pointing at me, so we'll take a photo of me for the receipt, so we can say that I have actually done the travelling. So when we click save, obviously that camera could be your web camera, or what you will actually think. You need to remember obviously that this is being designed to be used on the iPhone. So your member of staff could be at an event and they can on the fly add an expense and use the camera on the phone to obviously take a snapshot of whatever receipt it is they've got. So once that is saved, it will go back into the Power App. It goes back into that spreadsheet and that sample data. So we can see here that my travelling expense has been added. You can also see that there's an attachment. If I click on that and then go through to it, it shows that receipt. It's not the most flattering of views, obviously. So you can see the power of PowerApps in that one item. So let's close that one down. And probably what the best thing is to do is we'll save this app. We're going to save it to the cloud and we'll call it the budget tracker phone. And this button here allows us to share that Power App. So if we tick on that, then it basically allows other people in the organization to use it. At the moment, I'm going to leave that off and click on save. So that is our first Power App created, admittedly using a template from Microsoft, but it works well and it shows you how easy it is to actually create a Power App very, very simply. So once that Power App is saved, what we're going to flick to now is the actual iPhone. So let's have a look at that budget tracker actually on the iPhone itself. So here's the view of my iPhone. So let's open up the Office and Power Apps. And what you'll see once it's opened is you've got all the sample apps that you get with Microsoft Power Apps. And the second one down you can see is budget tracker phone, actually, and then obviously created by myself. So if we go into that one, as we said, it was designed for the iPhone, so it's designed for the phone view. So once it opens, which it's got to download that data and connect to my OneDrive for Business. So at this point, it's asking for permission to use things. So it's obviously asking for permission for my OneDrive for Business and also to use the camera on the iPhone. So we'll click allow. It will carry on opening and then you'll be able to see the budget tracker comes up. So here we are, here's that budget tracker using all of that sample data. So we can go into the team event at Contoso. You can see again exactly the same data. You can see all the expenses. So if we click on the traveling expense that we created and then click on that, then it will obviously bring up the details of that receipt, and there's that awful photo again. So if we go back a bit and add another expense, this time it's actually going to be some food. The expense amount was 50 and it's already selected food. We're going to add a receipt. And you can see now that actually what it's picked up is my iPhone camera. So I'm just going to take a quick snapshot of this blank piece of paper. So hit the screen to take the photo. We can either reuse that one or retake it. So hit use, hit save. And that expense will now be added to that Contoso events account. So back at the screen, you can see now we've got both the travelling and food expense. Again, if I click on food, go into it, you can basically see that picture of that nice blank yellow post-it note. And we go back, and then you can, as you can see, you can click further and further down and keep scrolling through all of these different items within the Power App. So as you can see, it's a great interface for people using the phone. It means I can actually go away and actually create a expense for a particular event. The next step in the demo is to show you how to create a Power App using your own data. So here I am in a simple Office 365 SharePoint tenant, and I've got a list called Contracts 1. And in there, it's just a basic list showing companies and types of contracts and some values in there. So it's a very, very simple list. So I'm going to use that data to actually be the source of creating a Power App. So if we go back to the Power App Design Studio and click on the phone layout for data from SharePoint Online, it wants a connection. So we're going to use our SharePoint Online connection. And these are some recent sites we've used, but what I'm going to do is actually use a new site that I've created. So enter the name of that site. And click the go button to connect. So you can see here it's connected to the site. It wants me to choose my list. So I'm going to use that contract 1 and click on the connect button. What that is doing now is PowerApps Design Studio is going away, looking at the list, analysing the data in that list and creating a Power App to fit the best way it can. So here we go, we've got our Power Apps. You can see it's contracts 1, and let's click on the play button and see how it's done with picking out the data. So here we can see we've won this contract. Let's click on the button, it takes you through to that detail for that item. So there you can see, very simply, we've managed to pick out a list of data and actually put it into a Power App. So if we actually come out of this, back into Design Studio, we can have a look at some of these items. So if we click on this one here, you can see that what it's actually picked out is the modified. So maybe we can actually change that and change it to one of the other. So we could change it to ID, or we could change it to the title. So you can see the title now becomes slightly different. It becomes the name of the company. So again, if we click on play again, we can see that the layout has changed slightly. So now we've got Adam's Decorator, obviously the type of business, interior decorating, and the consultant is myself. Again, we click on it and it goes through to the data for that. So straight away from that list we have managed to be able to create a simple Power App that everybody can actually use. So we've created the app and now we're back at the home screen. You can see it on there as one of the apps that we can actually open. But at the moment that app is only being able to use by me. So how do I actually share it out with other people in the organisation? So over to the right hand side here, if we click on the little image of the person with the plus, we can see there that I can actually now share that app out. So who can I actually share it with? So I can start adding names of people in my organisation and it will find them out, and I can then actually, they can use it and share it, or they can just use it or edit it. This top option allows them to use the app, but also if they want to, they can then share it with other people as well. Another option is this one here, which basically allows anybody in the organisation to use that app. So you can see as soon as I tick that box there, the entire organisation is there as can use it. So that contracts 1 becomes an app that the whole of the organisation can actually use. Probably not the best option for this type of app, as it only may be used by, say, the finance team or the sales team. But if you've got an app that is applicable to the whole organisation, then that's obviously the option to choose. I take that tick box out and basically it comes back to being just one used by myself. And we'll just close that down. So that's Power Apps in a very quick, very sort of simple way of viewing it. You can see how you can create Power Apps using templates and sample data that Microsoft supply you with, or you can have lists that you already have that have lots of data in there, and you can create those Power Apps from that data and then modify the views as you see fit. So the next thing we're going to look at is Flow. Okay, so let's launch Flow from the app launcher, and that will take us to the standard flow.microsoft.com page. And I'm going to go into My Flows. The first thing you'll notice is I haven't got any. Okay, so we're going to have to create a new flow. I can create from blank, or I can go into the templates. So let's go and have a look at some of the templates that Microsoft give you. So as you can see, just scrolling down and looking at the icons, you can see that there's some based on Office, some on SharePoint, some at Connect, in this case Dropbox and OneDrive, Twitter's in there, Yammer's in there. So there's all sorts of different templates that Microsoft have actually come up with. So what I'm going to do here is this one here, send me an email when a new file is added in SharePoint Online. So if I click on that, and it tells me exactly what it's going to do, and then I'm going to use this template. And what we'll get here is something that's be quite common to people. So we can see here that we've got the SharePoint Online. So it's saying, how am I actually going to connect to SharePoint Online? So as you notice from the earlier on in the session, we had those connections that I had already set up for SharePoint Online, Office 365 users, and Outlook. So we're saying connect to SharePoint Online using this user, and connect to Outlook and Office 365 using the same. So we're going to use those. If you want to, and you start with, when you start this for the first time and you haven't got any connections, you can actually click on the add new connection, and that will go through that same process you saw earlier as how to add a new one. So we're going to stick with those and click on continue. So basically now I have the options to actually start filling things in. So the first off is give me a site URL, and what it's going to do at this point is use that authentication, connect to SharePoint, and actually bring out all of the sites that I can actually access. So you've got sites in here, so I'm going to actually put in the site we actually want, so the same one we did earlier. So I just type that in, okay, so there's the site. It now wants me to actually give it a folder. So what it's going to do now is actually go through that site and find the folder. So down here you'll see there are all the sort of lists. There's lists in there. I'm going to go for the shared documents and choose that one. So straight away what it's saying at this point is when a file is created in that location. Then it says go and get my profile. So it's connecting using my login. And then it says, okay, send me an email. So you can see here there are things to drop in. So it says new file added, and it picks out the file name that's in SharePoint. And it says hi, given name, so it's picking out from the user profile what your given name is, and then picking out the file name and the file path. And who it's going to is the email address of the user from that profile. If I click on the ellipses, then I can add in some additional details. So I can actually put an attachment name in there. I can put who it's from, I can put a CC and a blind copy in there as well. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as this, as the default, and basically click on Create Flow. What Office 365 Flow and Microsoft will do now is actually save that flow, and as you can see, there it is, created. Click Done, and it will now take me back to that My Flows page, and I can actually see it. If I click on the manage, I can see that flow in there. Okay, so it was last modified 14 seconds ago, it's running. And this is the point where you can actually start managing your flows. So they got a pause button. So if I don't want it to go run any longer, I can turn it off. I can delete it. I can actually edit it if I want, if I'm not quite happy with some of the things it does, or I want to add something to that email. And I can actually see any runs that it's actually done. At the moment, there's no point clicking on that, as it will not have run anything. So the next thing is for us to add an actual document into that shared documents library. So if we go to the page, so we go back to our site, we've got the shared documents library here. At the moment there's nothing in it, so let's just do a new document, and we'll do a new Word document. Let's change that name. Okay, so that's our document in there, and you can see straight away it's in there. And now what should happen is the flow should pick that up, there's a new document added in there, and should then email me. So let's go, there we go. Instead of without even going to the mail app, we can see there that popped up, so there's a new file added. If I click on that, it'll open up Outlook, open that email message up, and there we can see a new file, PowerApps document.docx, was added, and it's actually located. A very simple email, a very simple flow. So if we go back to the managed flows, and we actually just refresh this page, and click on now the instance runs, what it should show me is that run. So it should show me now I've actually had two runs. So if I click on that one there, what it will actually give me is some of the detail. So I can see again the icons for all of the sections of the flow, but now I can actually click on them. So I can see where the URL is of the site, what the content of the file is. I can see that it's picked out my profile and it's picked out my given name and the email address, and then basically it shows me the send email. So if there are any errors, I can see it in those details of each section of the actual flow. So let's go back to My Flows. Back in the My Flows page, let's have a look at how we can create a new flow in a different way. So create new flow. As you noticed earlier on, I created a connection to my personal Dropbox. So in this case, I'm going to select Dropbox, and I'm going to select the root folder. So click choose. I then want to actually do something. So I'm going to click add an action. And from all of these actions that I can actually do, I'm going to basically send myself an email. So send an email, subject, as soon as I click in there, you can see some of the options I've got. So it's picking out some of the detail of that file that's going to be added into Dropbox. So I'm going to put file added, and then hit file name. And then in the body, I'm going to put hi, a new file has been added. I'll put brackets, file name, and the bracket, I'll put the file path in. And who am I going to send that email to? Well, at this point, you can see that actually I have a few options I can choose from. So I'm going to put basically my email address in there. And give it a name. And click on create flow. So once the flow is created, click done, click on manage, and it takes me back to that my flows page. And you can see there that the flow is now part of that section. So now let's go and have a look. Let's go and add a file into Dropbox and see actually if that flow works. So on the screen now, I've got my Dropbox on the left hand side, and on the right hand side I've got some images. And what I'm going to do is just drag this TechNet UK image into my Dropbox, into the root. So drag it over and drop it in there. That will upload that file into my Dropbox. And now what should happen is Microsoft Flow should be sitting looking at my Dropbox. It will see that there's a new file been added, and what it should do now, according to that flow, is actually email me to tell me that that file has been added. So let's go back to my email and actually see if the email has arrived. So if we navigate over to my email, we can see there straight away. Let's maximize this. So you see a new file has been added. So I've got an email basically telling me that that new file has been added to my Dropbox. So as you can see, that flow has been easy to create. It has some of the data in there I need. If we click on the instance runs, it should show us that it's ran once to actually show me that a file has been uploaded to Dropbox. So there you can see that one instance where the file has been uploaded, and it has run the logic flow, and there sent me the email. If I click on it, I can go in and get exactly the same amount of detail as I could on the other one. So I can see when the file was created, with the name of it, and again, if there were any errors, I can pick those out here. So as you can see, it's very straightforward to actually create flows. And now if I open up the PowerApps app and go to flows, I can now see those flows in my PowerApps application on my Windows computer. So that's the demos finished of PowerApps and Flow. What I've showed you is how to create PowerApps using templates and from your data, how to create flows using the templates and actually build them using other connections to external non-Microsoft applications. I've also shown you how a Power App looks on an iPhone and how it can interact very easily with the iPhone camera for taking photos of receipts and that sort of thing. So we've looked at the demos, we've seen how you can use Flow and Power Apps and how the iPhone app works. So now let's look at the roadmap for the two products. So on May the 4th at the Future of SharePoint event, there was a lot of talk about how Power Apps and Flow is going to be integrated into Office 365. Now at the time of recording this session, some of those features are not live. So the screenshots you can see on here are taken from the blog that Jeff Teeper wrote after the event. But basically, the roadmap for Power Apps is it's going to be integrated natively into SharePoint. You're going to be able to create Power Apps directly from within a list or a library. So as you can see from the screenshot, you can go to the All Items, create a Power App is an option there. So when you've created that Power App, because you created it from the list or a library within SharePoint itself, what we're going to see now is loading up a web-based designer. So as well as the app in Windows that you can get, if you create a Power App this way, then basically you're going to have the ability to design and configure that Power App from within the web browser. And once you've created that Power App, because you've used it from within SharePoint, then basically it will appear as a view. So as you can see from the screenshot, again taken from the blog post, that there is the big win approval, in this case the Power App, and then you can launch that Power App from within there and it will actually use the web player. So what about Flow? Again, it's another major investment in SharePoint and their technologies. It's going to be integrated natively into SharePoint again, and you're going to be create a new flow from within a list or a library. So there you can see on the screenshot, again taken from the blog post, that add a flow is an option now within a list. So thank you for staying tuned. Hopefully you found something useful in there. You have my contact details at the beginning of the session if you need to get hold of me, but please stay tuned for loads and loads of more sessions about Office 365, SharePoint and associated technologies.